Perfect. Well, thanks so much. First of all, I person, but I am literally traveling 3 weeks out of the next four, and this one, I happen to be in New York. I'm glad to be here. Thanks everyone. Great to see this center coming along. Things are moving forward. I think for my talk, I think maybe I'll just share some of the background of how, or more importantly, why I got interested in this, and share a little bit about stacks, like why we believe in it and what impact it can potentially have. So maybe we'll dive in. I had some slides prepared, but I think I'll first just talk. If I need to pull them up, I'll try to share it from Zoom because I think I'll probably need permission for that. For now, let's dive in. So for people who don't know, I am LUMS BSc 2003 computer science graduate. I have worked with Dr. Zatash Uzmi, who I believe is sitting there as well. Ali was my classmate. Durrani, I recognize him sitting over there. He was 2004. So grew up with all these people. Have very very fond memories of LAMS and being there. I was sort of always obsessed with computer science research, and Dr. Zatash and other people really helped me pursue that. Through a couple of years of working here and there, eventually ended up in a grad school program at Princeton, and did my PhD there. I was almost done with my PhD, so I was supposed to graduate, so I started in 2008, was supposed to graduate in 2013, and I for various reasons, was more interested in doing startups than pursuing academia. So I took a leave right before submitting my thesis and was exploring various things. And I think 2013 turned out to be a good year to just be poking around and exploring various stuff because Bitcoin was just starting. So stumbled across Bitcoin and sort of started getting the feeling that this is the next sort of cutting edge of what computer science research might look like at that time. I think even today, I would say it's AI and crypto. Right? Those are the two areas which I think would be the cutting edge. So discovering one of them 12 years ago was, you can call it a lucky coincidence, but it's also like a famous saying that the luck favors the prepared mind. So I was doing systems, we're trying to scale distributed systems, and when I discovered Bitcoin, saw this almost massive opportunity. Especially back then. I mean, now it's a very different ballgame, but back then there weren't a lot of computer scientists who were actively working in this space. So just to give everyone an idea, Bitcoin would trade at $80 at that point. It was a very, very small community. I was based out of New York at that time, and a funny story I often share is that just like right now when Bitcoin crosses $100,000, people think it's too expensive, and they try to buy the dips below $100,000. So we were at that time trying to buy the dips below $100. When it will go above 100, we'll feel it's too expensive. Maybe we'll start to take some profits and so on. And after a while, started realizing the economic side of Bitcoin, right? I'm an engineer. I was coming mostly from the technology side, but it took me a while to understand how Bitcoin is actually savings technology. And this is something that is creating almost like a neutral store of value outside of all the different systems that we have come up with over the past centuries and so on, and which is pretty groundbreaking. I think in Pakistan, people do understand the value of land and the value of gold, and Bitcoin is much more similar to that, but it's neutral, and any single country's internal geopolitics or economy is not going to impact it. So imagine you're owning this digital property online where you are not sort of subject to any single country's economic upheaval or any geopolitical tensions and so on. So it's like a neutral store of value for the entire planet. And I think people are slowly recognizing that. Obviously, it takes time for technologies to mature. I do think the ETFs approvals that happened last year for Bitcoin were a big thing. And even just recently, Bitcoin, even after 10 plus years, it would still trade as a risk asset. So if the markets are going down, people would sell Bitcoin first. Whereas it's supposed to be the opposite, right? Like it's supposed to be decoupled from the traditional trading markets. And very, very recently, just last week, if you look at the stock market, Bitcoin has started behaving that way. And I think that's a big shift that we will see moving forward, that the markets are slowly recognizing the asset for what it is. And then we're at a very, very early stage. Like it might seem like, Bitcoin is very expensive now, or Bitcoin has maybe reached its potential or something. I think we're barely getting started. It's programmable money. So when a lot of engineers and developers, they actually figure out how they can program this neutral, unstoppable sort of money, I think you'll start seeing a lot of financial services all across the world being rewritten in this new type of technology. And when I joined, I think there was a question about how sending payments over blockchain is more efficient. I think that's just like one like tiny application, but even that application is already reaching like hundreds of millions of users. Like Tether has something like 200 million plus users already around the world. And for people like us who are deep in crypto, we are at a point already where using banks actually feels like a 10x worse user experience. Right? Like when I need to send money to somebody in Hong Kong or Singapore, it's literally 2 clicks for me, like in my wallet, versus going to a bank and getting approvals and putting address information and all of that. Like it feels like a 10x worse experience. But also, you can't really program the money that's sitting in your bank account. I think that's the huge difference over here. With Bitcoin, and I'll get into other cryptocurrencies as well, these things are fully programmable, meaning that most of the primitives that were defined on Wall Street. So imagine how stock trading works, or people do lending, borrowing, or other happening on Wall Street. Almost everything, and even new stuff that people haven't thought about yet, can be implemented with Bitcoin and blockchains in a much more transparent and much more sort of like efficient manner. So if I was Wall Street right now, I'd be like very scared of this technology. But obviously, this is how, like the analogy would be, when email came, it was like pretty clear that the digital version is absolutely going to be better than sending letters, right? But it just takes time for these things to reach the masses, and I think we are slowly getting there. Bitcoin adoption depends on how you measure it, is definitely below 10% right now. By some measures, it's sort of like 5%, and so we're very, very early. That brings me to the work at Stacks. So what is Stacks? Basically, when I discovered Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a very sort of like simple technology in a way. People who are familiar with computer networks, it sort of reminds me of TCP/IP. So TCP/IP is a very low-level layer for communication. It just does one thing. It takes data from one place and sends it to another. And I think Bitcoin is sort of like simple like that. All it does, it takes value, money, from one place and sends it to another place, right? In a fully decentralized way. No one controls it, and that's sort of like the beauty of it. Many other people in the industry, including Vitalik, who started Ethereum, realized that you can make this type of technology more programmable. So you can run full smart contracts. Think of smart contract as almost like a computer that can do anything, versus Bitcoin that is almost like a calculator. It can just do very precise, simple things. So people like Vitalik and others, they started alternate blockchains where they're more programmable. They're sort of like more, and some are faster, some are cheaper, and so on. I think the idea that me and my colleagues had, and which sort of like separates out our work, is that we are fully focused on Bitcoin. We think that Bitcoin as the asset is going to dominate in the market. Yes, there are going to be other experiments that happen, but those experiments are sort of like going to frizzle away over time because any of the best features from those experiments would eventually be implemented on top of Bitcoin. It's a very simple idea, but we were sort of like the minority until very recently. I would say it's like it sort of like showed how stubborn I am in terms of sticking to the thing that we were working on. We were a tiny project in the grand scheme of things in the industry, and mostly like people would look at us and sort of like dismiss us that yeah, Bitcoin, yes, it's hard to program it, no one programs it, it's never going to happen. And technically it was very, very hard as well, because you can't really change Bitcoin, right? So imagine Stacks is a layer on top of Bitcoin that tries to make Bitcoin more programmable, so people can move BTC from the Bitcoin layer, call it L1, to Stacks, which is the L2, and then they can use it in a cheaper, faster, more programmable way. But there are tons of technical challenges that have to be solved. There are tons of sort of like cultural challenges within the industry that we had to work on for this idea to take off. And I'm sort of like pretty happy that in the last couple of years the tides are turning. Now I think a lot of people are realizing that the true sort of like innovation is actually Bitcoin. That's the thing that's gaining market traction. That's the thing that the institutions are coming towards, and people are finally getting the idea that Bitcoin can be as programmable as Ethereum or these other networks are great experiments. I think some of them will survive in one form or the other, but I'll just give one metric, right? It's like if you look at this thing is called Bitcoin dominance. So what would happen typically 4 or 5 years ago is so we go through these like growth boom and bust cycles. So suddenly there's a ton of interest, investors come in, developers come in, and we are going through a boom period. That's when the technology expands, and then we go through a bust cycle, like which is pretty drastic, right? So at this point we are more used to it. People have seen it a couple of times, and during these cycles, you would typically notice that Bitcoin dominance would go down. People would come in and start other projects. Like that's how Solana started some years ago. That's how Avalanche started, or 10 other of these projects. But very recently, in the last couple of years, Bitcoin dominance is hovering at like 65% or something. And there are actually more projects that are out there, like tons of more projects. But Bitcoin is actually now almost like standing out, not just as an asset in terms of people trading it, but also as a technology and as a project where now there are many other projects like Stacks that are trying to do similar things. And that's actually a good thing for us, because you want to compete in a market. You don't want to be in a place where your idea is so sort of like unique and different that you're dismissed as like a small thing. And when I say small, like this is in crypto terms. So at the peak of Stacks, which was sort of like last year, hopefully we're going to do much better in the future. But Stacks was trading at something like $5 billion. Even today, I think it trades north of like $1 billion. It might sound like a big number, but in our industry, like it's pretty small, right? Like there are projects that have hundreds of billions of market cap, or tens of billions is something that is pretty realistic for these things. And given the amount of Bitcoin capital that's there, I'll just give you an example. So we opened up our deposits for Bitcoin in December, and for security reasons, we put an initial cap on how much Bitcoin can be deposited. Our first cap was roughly $100 million, which was filled up in, I would say, 48 hours. Then in this January, we increased our cap to $300 million, and we got 200 million additional Bitcoin within 24 hours, right? So that's the amount of Bitcoin capital that's sort of like sitting out there, waiting to be deployed, and Bitcoin is already in trillions of dollars. In that sense, like we are sort of like just at the very, very beginning of making Bitcoin more productive, because if we are the rails where Bitcoin moves in a cheaper, faster, better UX way, and that's where people actually build all the applications, so all the economy actually exists on Stacks, I think that's a very interesting opportunity for us to sort of like work on it. That's the overview. You guys can learn more on Saks.co, and I'm pretty active on Twitter. And my Twitter username is Muneeb, which is my first name, Muneeb. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know, Ali, if you guys have any questions. I know that there's one more thing I need to jump to.
I know you have a hard stop, so I think Durrani has some point to make.
Hey, Muneeb, how are you doing? I'm a big fan, I'm a supporter. But so just to play devil's advocate for the crowd, I'm going to ask a simple question. So BTC, $2 trillion of BTC sits out there without being used just as a value asset. How does Stacks help monetize that $2 trillion into something more commercial?
Yes. So I think there are a couple of applications which are live on Stacks and they're getting some traction. One is a very simple one. A lot of people don't want to sell their Bitcoin, but they would lock up their BTC to take a stablecoin loan. And that's something that we're seeing traction for. This is for even like as simple reasons as tax. Like, I don't want to pay capital gains taxes on my Bitcoin, but I would rather draw a loan against it and just use that loan and then eventually return the loan, because I believe the Bitcoin price is going much higher in the next couple of years than where it is today. So that application, we're seeing a bunch of traction for it. Similarly, the other thing is that Bitcoin is right now a passive asset. So if you compare to the next or even Solana, which got some traction, people earn yields on it. Like around 35% of all ETH is actually locked up in various yielding strategies. And Bitcoin, you can barely earn a yield on Bitcoin right now. So that's a huge opportunity to turn Bitcoin from a passive asset to a yielding asset where people can make like a 3%, 4%. Like right now, people would even take a 1% yield because it's mostly zero. Bitcoiners don't really earn that much yield on their BTC. So that's another example of taking the passive potential of Bitcoin and turning it into a productive asset and actually enabling it in financial markets.
Thank you, Muneeb, for your time, for your generosity. And I have seen your journey, and I can tell that, the purity of your work, your focus, Allah will certainly give you more success. And as I said earlier, it gives us pride that you are at the cusp of making this innovation on Bitcoin, the biggest asset in the digital asset space. And some people over here might know that when you developed it, Stacks was the only token which got SEC approval. At a time when nobody even wanted regulatory cover, you proactively worked with the regulator, got the stamp of approval from the US SEC. And I think that's the approach, the long-term approach of building strongly, which you have been doing, which makes us more proud and bigger supporter of Stacks and you. Thank you for your time. I know you have to run. We will continue the conversation here.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
That's right. So, Ali,